So let's begin. First, let's welcome our interviewer, Leslie Westbrook. Leslie Westbrook, the Montecito Journal columnist and author of The Insider's Guide to Santa Barbara 5th edition, as well as SBCC, A Century of Success. Hi, Leslie, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, Michael, and hi, everybody. It's hard to go against Jeopardy, Mary. I wasn't sure if it was you or Steve's wife that was listening to Jeopardy there in the background. Anyway, it's great to be with everybody, even though it's virtual. I know we all miss being at Chaucer's for book signings, but it's nice to see your smiling faces, those of you that are there. So I'm very...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm very excited to get to talk with Steve about Published and Perished, some forgotten Santa Barbara writers remembered. I've known Steve for a long time. He was originally an attorney, and he's published some 20 books, and he just seems to have a love affair with Santa Barbara history, literary Santa Barbara, authors, publishers, and everything else. And this book is just a delight. I woke up at 3 a.m. last night and grabbed it. And it's what's fun about it is you can just sort of, you see mine's all marked up, but you can open it anywhere and find such fascinating stories about people. And they range from the absurd and silly to him raising skeletons out of the closets for these long dead people who have sort of scandalous backgrounds and stories. It's really, really a lot of fun. And some of these are at great length. We'll talk about them. And some of them are as simple as somebody died here, or they gave a lecture here, or they have a long history here, and a lot of family names that some of you will recognize. So anyway, I think it's time we bring the author on and we can get going. I guess Steve's dead.
No, I'm available.
Published and perished.
Right.
You have to start your video, Steve.
What do I have
Turn on the video, buddy.
Start your video.
Right.
Yay!
Okay.
There you are. Hey.
Yeah. Okay.
Steve, hi. It's great to see you.
Hi, and thank you, Leslie and Michael. It's wonderful to be here. I sure do miss Chaucer's and live ones, but I'll take virtual. Virtually is good.
You know, before we get into some of these specific little bon mots and incredible research here, I thought it would be fun just to talk to people about, you know, how you fell down the rabbit hole of researching a lot of these people that I think you referenced in earlier books, and you said now with the internet, you were able to really get a lot more information. So why don't you share some of your research and writing experience with us?
Well, I actually, my compadre, Dean Stewart, and I did an actual literary history of Santa Barbara back in the 90s in the last century. And that was pretty complete up to the time. We went probably through the mid 80s. And after that, I retired. I had a lot of time. And I discovered there were a lot of writers that we just knew their names, but knew almost nothing about them. And so, by the way, when we were doing this, that was way before the internet. I mean, before Google, I should say. I was able to look them up, and they were also digitized in newspapers, which they weren't at the time, and found out a lot of information. I thought it was really sort of cool stuff about them, pretty interesting. And so I love doing the research. Actually, writing is more difficult for me, but and came up and discovered more and more, and the book expanded and expanded. And this is what we found. Now, some people ask, well, how come Ross McDonald or Sue Grafton aren't in here? Well, the one reason is they're not forgotten. And the second reason, these people that were really well known got full treatment in the original book. There's really nothing more to say. Here were people that, you know, when I started this book, I had never heard of them. So it was fun, just sort of literary archaeology, digging them up and putting them up.
What I was really curious about is how many of these people that you wrote about, because you reference their books, you have excerpts from some of them, how many of their actual books or whatever it was that they wrote, whether it was poetry or or they were journalists at the time. How many of their actual work did you read?
Well, that's an embarrassing question.
Sorry.
Because this is not a critical biography where one talks about their works and has read all the books. That would have been impossible. And most of the books, they're all out of print and they're not very good. A lot of them are sort of purpley prose from Victoriana and all of that. So I was really more interested in their lives, and not in their complete lives. I have to say something about that. Most of them were not born and raised here. And some of them had, maybe they spent a couple months here, maybe they taught a semester at UCSB. It's sort of like George Washington slept here, but that was enough to capture them and put them in the book, especially if they did write a book or articles or something in the newspaper about Santa Barbara that described it. So there's a lot of descriptions of Santa Barbara from books so obscure, you will probably never even see them. And as a matter of fact, many of the books by authors who did live here, they're not even in the library here. They're pretty hard to find.
Pretty obscure.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with, you start with Josephine Walcott, who has a fascinating story that ties into the Hollisters. Maybe you can just give a little overview about her. And I loved it because, I was going to ask you if you knew any more about that, but she was very involved with the Spiritualist Society, which was in Summerland, which I cover for the paper. So that was kind of little interested me.
Right. Yeah. She's remarkable. She actually wrote the first book, true book, about Santa Barbara, which was a collection of poems that was published in Boston. She came here in 1870 with her 3 children and her husband. She was very beautiful, smart, real smart, and well educated about all the thinkers of the time. She was a suffragette. She spoke up and down the coast, and this is, the women didn't get the vote for 50 years later, but this was in 1870, the time of Susan Anthony and people like that. And then spiritualism was a big rage in the 1870s and 1880s. We look back at it now as being pretty absurd, trying to talk with spirits, but in table thumping and all of that. But it was for real, and she was pretty smart, so I don't think she was duped. But what happened, why she's interesting, her book, the poetry isn't very good by today's standards. Sort of that, I would say she rides the purple page, it wouldn't sell today. But she had an affair with Colonel Hollister himself, W.W. Hollister, the leading citizen of Santa Barbara, the richest man. And she had a child. And people knew about it. Hollister was apparently quite a womanizer. And she left town. She went up to Berkeley to have the child. And somehow the child stayed up there. I don't know how that happened. And it was only acknowledged when Hollister died some years later, and he left a sizable amount of money to the daughter. Well, he never acknowledged that he was the father, but he left her a lot of money. Everybody knew. So that was the beginning. And she was, fascinating woman, really worth knowing.
And her daughter never knew that he was her father, right?
Yeah, the daughter's name was Queen Walcott, or Queenie. And she was actually I finally found her in a paper around 1900 in San Francisco Examiner as a bicycle champion. Bicycles were the hot things, like hot rods. And she had won a bunch of contests, and there was her picture on the front page. And then she switched to horses, and she ended up working at the Del Monte Lodge, and ended up going to Paris, and she was teaching riding. And then when the war started, she went south and she died in the 40s. That's all I know about her. So it's hard to find.
It's not just these Victorian women. I mean, you have references to William Faulkner, Sinclair Lewis, Thomas Mann, William Butler Lake, W.B. Yeats. But I'm really interested in the story we were talking about the other day. And it's interesting because you got a lot of the Beat people and Kenneth Rexroth. There's a lot of poetry.
Yeah.
But the one that I really thought was interesting was Gavin Arthur, if you would talk about
wow.
a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he was the grandson of Chester Allen Arthur, our probably most forgotten president. And Chester Allen Arthur had a son who was called Allen, Chester Allen Arthur II, who was a real playboy. He was described as a great fornicator in his day. And anyway, he married a Fithian girl, Myra Fithian, and Joel Fithian. You know, the Fithian building and all these ranches and Carpinteria. I mean, and he started the Montecito Club, and his sons were big shots. And he was actually born in Colorado Springs, but he was raised here. His mother lived in Carpinteria, actually. They got divorced. She and her husband, Chester Allen Arthur II. So this guy's actually, his name is Chester Allen Arthur III. So he went to Cate's school. When he was in Cate, the Irish Rebellion was on, and he had Irish stock, and he decided to change his name to Gavin, an Irish name that was actually somewhere in his family way back. And he wanted to leave Cate and go to Ireland and fight in the rebellion, but of course, Mommy and Daddy said, no, we can't do that. But finally, he broke free, and he and his mother, they went to Columbia University. He dropped out, and he did go to Europe and was involved with the Irish. But also, he was gay in a time when that really was sort of in the closet, obviously. But he had all these affairs. By the way, he was an extremely good-looking guy. I mean, really handsome and very, very smart. And he had a gay old time in London. And in Dublin in Ireland. And then that is such a long story. Anyway, he came back and he got married because he liked women too, I think. Of course, the woman he married was a lesbian. She was sort of in this Paris society, so it's just so bizarre. And anyway, during the Depression, he decided to sit it out, and he went to the dunes in Oceano. And they started a sort of a commune there, an artistic commune, and published a magazine called the Dune Forum. And he had the leading intellectuals of the West Coast would all drop by, and they would contribute articles. And by the way, it's all online. It's really an incredibly beautiful magazine. And then he ends up going to San Francisco. Oh, he never got a degree. So he went to San Francisco State, got a degree, and was teaching at Alcatraz. And one of his students was Jack Kerouac's buddy, and this guy got out. He was on a marijuana charge, and they lived together in San Francisco. And then Gavin got into astrology, and he became a leading figure in astrology in San Francisco in the 60s. He wrote for the Oracle. He's called sometimes the father of the New Age. And also he was very interested in sex. And he wrote a famous book called The Circle of Sex. None of these books are in print. And he ended up becoming, I would say, sort of a very well-known leading figure in the whole movement in San Francisco before he died. So that's just one.
Tie in with the Hydes of Mountain Drive, or
oh yeah. So there's if you live here, you know Gavin Hyde, maybe, or Bobby Hyde, and this was all up the Mountain Drive people. And Gavin was his nephew. And his mother named him after Gavin, Uncle Gavin. Yeah, there's a lot of family stuff if you're deep into history around here.
I noticed that you was Tomas Sanchez a source for you in this book a couple of places on Raymond Carver and Noel Young.
Yeah. Well, Sanchez, I didn't have him in here. Oh, by the way, everybody in here is dead.
Right, I know. He's still very much alive, and
yeah, he's still alive. I don't think he's forgotten yet.
No, he's not.
The next edition, possibly.
And then you mentioned the guy that wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Oh, yeah, well, people, Douglas Adams,
right?
he came here, his ambition was to eventually make a movie of the Hitchhiker's Guide. And after a lot of aborted efforts, they got the green light. He decided to move here. He didn't want to live in Hollywood, but Montecito looked real good. And he came here and he was infatuated with the whole lifestyle, bought himself a Mercedes, hung out at Pierre Lafond. He bought a place in the hedgerows in Montecito. And then, unfortunately, a couple of years later, he was working out at a local gym here and he had a heart attack and died.
Oh.
You could write a whole book on people that just happen to die here, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But,
speaking of Montecito, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of Montecito, then one of the earlier guys had some, I don't know if you could read a couple of those excerpts, if you can put your hands on it, but there was one fellow that wrote a book and his scathing takedown of Montecito is just wonderful.
Yeah, there was a guy named Roger Cowles. He was actually a classmate at Kate with Gavin.
Mm.
And he was gay as well. And he has this sort of sensibility about him, very waspish. And he wrote a book, it was originally called Distant Drums, and it was published in England. And then they decided to do an American edition, but Distant Drums apparently was a successful play on Broadway and they couldn't use it. And he had disguised, well, a lot of writers who write about Santa Barbara change the name, such as Sue Grafton and Ross McDonald. They called it Santa Teresa. Almost nobody uses Santa Barbara for some reason, so they won't offend anybody. Anyway, he called it San Felipe. And the book was the San Felipians. And it's a house party in Montecito for a weekend, and all these disparate characters show up. And one of them he starts out, this is one about the fiesta. He says, every year the town in all but obstetrical agony endures and celebrates an old Spanish holiday. An empress about to be delivered of a future master of kingdoms and principalities could not have more pother made of the coming event than the Santa Barbara has of all its fiesta for weeks and months beforehand. The silly and even nauseating spectacle of a bygone era, stolen by an alien race of conquerors and rascals, for such we surely were to the Spaniards, and turned into a piece of outlandish clothing store hangers-on. Fiestas a custom stolen from a race whom we tricked out of their lands, that it has been revived for sentimentalists made possible by the heirs of successful pork packers, bolstered up and advertised by shopkeepers and real estate sharks. It is fraudulent and distasteful. And then it gets really bad. So,
yeah, Kenneth Rexroth didn't have very good things to say about Santa Barbara, the university either. Oh, he enjoyed the students, I think, right?
no, he loved teaching. Rexroth was, he's probably maybe next to Douglas Adams, not forgotten. But
Right.
I would imagine anybody who was born in this century, he wasn't forgotten because he was never known. You ask somebody who's 20 about Kenneth Rexroth, they don't know him, but anybody older than that would know him. He was a really seminal figure in San Francisco and jazz and poetry. And the Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide, I don't know if it's read. At one time, it was like every young person had the book. No, Rexroth came here. He left San Francisco with his secretary, Carol Tinker. A lot of people know, and she was a poet as well. He moved over on Lilac Lane in Montecito, got an old house, and he loved the beach. He went up to the hot springs. He loved the life, but he didn't think much of. First place, let me go back. Almost everybody who comes here from somewhere else, like San Francisco or the East, always puts down Southern California as just sort of de rigueur, the baked brain syndrome and nothing ever happens here and all the intellectuals on here. It's sort of crazy, but that's what they usually do. And he had come from San Francisco and he knew everybody. And but it turned out that teaching was just the greatest thing, and it became, his students loved him, but the university did not, and they tried to stop him. They had a big rebellion, and this was all during the time of the IV riots back in the 60s. And he was here for years, and he did pass away here. Ultimately, he had a stroke and lived here. And he had many, many students that remember him, like Paul Portuguese and other people like that who live here now, that he was a seminal influence on them. He was a mentor.
I was talking with my friend Daniel Lentz, who's a composer here in town, and he said, I was told him about this book, and he said that he and Rex Roth used to teach each other's classes.
Really?
And then he was Kit Tremaine, and I realized after reading it, I thought that the Tremaine was Kit Tremaine, but it's not. It's a different Tremaine, because she had been a sponsor, a patron of his for many, many years. So I don't know what the relationship was to Kit Tremaine.
Well, I'll tell you, actually, I just discovered it because somebody else told me, oh, you have a piece about Kit Tremaine. This is actually a woman named Emily Tremaine, and she was a baroness. She moved here and she married a German baron who's 19 years old. She was Baroness von Romberg, and she was a real cut up, sort of a flapper of the 20s. Anyway, she finally, in her older age, she married a guy named Burton Tremaine, who was a billionaire, a millionaire at the time, and they amassed one of the greatest art collections of the 20th century. But it turns out that Burton Tremaine's brother, Philip, was married to Kit Tremaine, who's a well-known philanthropist and writer in Santa Barbara. They were sisters-in-law, and both of them loved architecture. They had a house here by Neutra, and Emily built houses. And there's a book that came out a couple of years ago from Getty Publications called The Tremaines. And it's about both couples and their devotion to architecture.
Oh, how cool.
I'm going to add that in the next edition because I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was wondering what the connection was, because she was a big art collector and a huge patron. But I think, yeah. But
it was more political than I think Emily was.
One of my favorite parts of the book, is you're writing the book, you added bookstores and publishers. So, Noel Young was a dear friend. And so it was just wonderful to see and read about him and Black Sparrow and Grib Smith. So, I mean, Santa Barbara, for a little town, and because of Graham McIntosh, the great printer, had just this juicy, little small press publishing thing empire. And what was really interesting to me was Black Sparrow Press, about the rights, what did you tell me? He retired Martin retired and sold the publishing rights for Bukowski, Fonte, and Bowles to HarperCollins for a 7-figure price. And the rest of the Black Sparrow backlist was sold to David Godine for $1.
Right.
That was really fascinating.
Well, that's because the authors could continue to get royalties.
Right.
So it would stay in print. Yeah.
And then a lot of those presses, you were talking about San Francisco coming down here, but a lot of these people ended up going up to the Bay Area, right?
Yeah.
Not
so,
capital.
Yeah, I don't think there's no, well, of all those presses, the only one around anymore is, let me see. Well, Gibb Smith is still around in Turkey Press, which isn't, it's sort of, Turkey Press is really an artistic printed book. The art of the book, it's unique.
Right.
And that's a real thing. And they both taught at UCSB.
Harry and Sandra Reed, who do beautiful hand-bound,
gorgeous
special books. They do a lot of books with Glenna Berry Horton, or Glenna Luschke. Do you know her, who lives here in Carpinteria?
No,
She's a fabulous poet in her 80s that you should know about. And she used to teach at Cal Poly, so she kind of goes back and forth from Carpinteria to San Luis Obispo. And then we got to talk about the bookstores, right? You talk about Earthling and some early books.
Right, yeah.
And of course, Chaucer's.
Well, Chaucer's is in here, including a beautiful picture of Mara Curley. But The one that I had the most fun with was the Unicorn Bookshop, which was only around a few years in Isla Vista. And it was started by Jack Shoemaker and Missy Beidinger. And it was an incredible place. All the poets, everybody came there. And they started a publishing wing called Unicorn Press that lasted until recently. And it was a great story. It was just a magnificent bookstore.
Yeah, that was incredible. Gary Snyder, Thomas Merton, Robert Bly, W.S. Merwin, Philip Levine. I mean,
Poets would go up and down the coast, and stopping at IV was part of what you did. And yeah, right. And they did, so Unicorn Press did the most beautiful books. That was Alan Brilliant and T.O. Savory. And they couldn't afford the rent anymore, so they ended up moving to North Carolina.
It makes me want to look at the Friends of the Carpinteria Library Bookstore or the Planned Parenthood book sale for some of these gems.
Yes, there you go. It's a plug.
See if they surface.
Yeah, and Leslie was a former Summerlander that escaped to Carpinteria recently, so you wear both hats.
Yeah, once in Summerland, 30 years there. Once a Summerlandian, always a Summerlandian.
Yeah.
What else? Is there something else that you want to mention that we didn't talk about? There's so much in here.
There's 40 biographies in here, so I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Is there something that after you finished it that you missed that you went, oh, darn.
Yeah. Well, actually, right after this, here's the thing. I published this myself in very small numbers, maybe like 20 books, and it's all on my computer. So as I discover somebody else, I put them in the book and then reprint more. So the new editions will constantly have people. But the one I learned about, because somebody said, did you know that Mark Harris lived here? And Mark Harris is, he wrote the Spaceball Quartet, Southpaw, and some other books. And he taught at Arizona State, but his books are much admired. So I got him in here. He's another one that came here late. Unfortunately, had Alzheimer's and he passed away here, but his children live here. And I've got a couple other really astounding people, I think. It'll be a surprise. You have to get the next edition.
What edition are you up to now?
Pardon me?
What edition are you up to now?
Well, the one in the bookstores is, I only added Mark Harris, but I'm going to add about 5 more soon, if I can organize it.
So when you do that, will you note 2nd edition, 3rd edition in the front of the book?
That's a good idea. Yes, I should. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I was, yeah.
Yeah, so we know we have 1st edition. I wondered why.
First editions can be very, very rare. I've done all these books. Somebody once told me that they were bragging about how rare their first editions were. And I said, not as rare as my second.
One of the things,
unlike your book, which is in its 5th edition, Leslie, so that's pretty something. I only
wrote the last one.
On a 2nd edition.
One of the things that I noticed, and I chided Steve before we got on tonight, I said, it's really nicely designed in photos and everything. And I said, but I read everything, the acknowledgements, and you didn't say anything about the book designer, because poor book designer is always forgotten. And he said he did it. So bravo, man of many talents here.
Right. Thank you.
Did you want to open it up to some questions?
Oh yeah, definitely, of course. Yeah. Definitely. Anybody? Shoot.
Don't be shy. Oh, you have
I think they're all my
unmuted.
relatives.
You have to unmute yourselves.
Well, I just want to say hi and just say I've always
Robin.
loved. Yes, a cousin.
All the way from Redondo Beach.
Yes, and it's so great to be here on Zoom with my cousin, who's been such an amazing, prolific writer. As long as I've known him, pretty much. Well, I've known him for a long time, but I can't wait. I have to say, I haven't read the book yet. I'm eager to get it. But one of my favorite books of Steve's, if you don't mind me just shouting out for it, is his California shorts and his LA shorts. I love when Steve puts stories together, you know, how he goes and he finds these amazing stories and he crafts them together. They're incredible reads. And I just don't know where Steve finds these things, but they are some of my favorite books, are Steve's books.
Thank you very much for the plug. I sent her a script. Read it.
Yeah, you
Oh,
really,
by the way, where I find them is like the library. So it's always a good place to start.
I know, but you read a lot and you find and you
Yeah.
hone in on the ones that are really incredible stories.
Yeah, I do read a lot. I live vicariously through books, that's why. But I'm missing a lot in real life, the virtual.
I'm trying to find some books by Elena Poniatowski, you know, the Mexico City author. And it was so weird because the library lists like 8 of her books and none of them are anywhere. 0 copies, 0, 0. So it was
Yeah.
interesting that they list them, but they don't have them. And I thought,
Wonder where they are. Yeah.
I mean, they don't even have them in their stock.
Yeah.
It's not that they weren't available. So that's obscure. You could do that next book. Authors, famous authors who aren't in the Santa Barbara Library.
Right.
You can buy
Even
the
for
books.
obscure. Anybody else?
What's
Oh,
your next book,
Elizabeth.
Steve? What's your next book?
There she is.
Yes.
Hi,
There's 2
Steve.
authors, right? There's 2 authors.
Yes.
So Lawrence has a question for you.
Well, hi, Steve. It's good to see you. It's been
Hi,
a long
Lawrence.
time. We're
Yeah,
thrilled to
right.
see you. Could you just talk a little bit about how this book relates to the big book, the literary Santa Barbara book? Are they kind
Well,
of,
yeah. It's sort of really a sequel. The literary Santa Barbara
that makes
starts
sense.
with the Chumash, and it goes all the way up to about 1990. So there's a lot of great stuff in there. And it's really, again, more of a history of Santa Barbara through its writers. And that book is, I think you can still get it. It's around. And so, as I was saying earlier, what I hear, I try to use people that were not in that book that I really didn't know much about. And I could add to their story. Although some of them were in there, like Rex Roth and Sarah Teasdale, but there was more information and biographies that come out of these people later that talked about Santa Barbara. So get them both.
Yeah.
You have a
I got-
copy.
I started on the first one. That's I love that book. Yeah.
Yeah, you've been working on it for about 10 years.
It's taken me that long to really
Hard going.
understand. Oh, I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
Almost as long as you're working on your novel, right?
You know, that book actually went back to the editor yesterday. So thank
Oh,
God.
congrats. I look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah.
What's your next book? What's your next project, Steve?
I have no idea. I think this might, well, I think I'll just keep on doing the new editions of this one forever. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question they want to ask? Speak up.
Steve, obviously it's very important to tell all these stories, but what drove you? What inspired you to want to tell?
I think there's a touch of madness that, I've always liked books and literature, and the first books I did were all about books, had nothing to do with Santa Barbara. And then, so I moved here about 40 years ago, and then I sort of fell in love with Santa Barbara. And, a lot of people, when they first move here, become enraptured or besotted with Santa Barbara and all about it. They want to join the museum and the history museum and how rich it is. And it's containable, because unlike if you move to New York or LA or somewhere, it would be too much. But here you can learn a lot. And I thought it was great. And so then I was finding writers that had written about Santa Barbara, and they were in these fugitive volumes that you'll never see. So what I did is sort of pluck them out of there and put them together in an anthology that people could read.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just fun. And by the way, at the same time, I had started Speaking of Stories, and that was also rounding up short stories and pieces. So I sort of knew a lot about, I kept up in literature and literary stuff. And a lot of it was research. The Santa Barbara literary history took years, and a lot of interviews. We interviewed Noel Young and a lot of people that are no longer with us. There were so many people.
Mhm.
And some of that is interesting material. It's like an oral history.
Mhm. So over the last 40 plus years, I have to say you were a public servant to the literary world of Santa Barbara. And for all of us writers, bookstore employees, we really appreciate all your hard work. And
Well, thank you. Well,
um,
yeah,
the most important thing I think for this writer is to say that you're keeping the names of those who aren't named Grafton, McDonald, or T.C. Boyle alive, while reminding us that about the local bookstores, past and present, and their importance.
yeah.
So, pretty much, Steve, you're a gem to the community. is what I'm
Gee,
trying to
thank
say.
He's a hero, and I think these are like love letters to Santa Barbara.
Well, in doing the first book, we didn't really care if we ever sold one book. If it was in the library and all these people who were here and came through here in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and whose names, as Keith said, were writ in water, were remembered. So it's on a shelf in the library, and anybody one day would take it down, and there it was. And then they can bring it up to date. So, yeah, actually, I have to say that Dean and I, we were remembered. We became local heroes when the book came out in the Independent, because they said, who would be so foolish to spend all that time writing a book of not very wide appeal? So that makes you a hero.
So Steve, you're an avid reader. So who are some of your dead or alive favorite Santa Barbara authors?
Well, I still can read Ross McDonald with pleasure. Pico Iyer, always.
Yeah.
T.C. Boyle, I've been reading a lot of him. That's about it. I don't really, by the way, I'm listening to books more than I'm reading them. And then the research here takes a lot of time, which I enjoy, but and I'm trying to read less and get out in the real world while I can. Whatever time is allotted me.
Digging up the skeletons of the past.
Yes, it's like a big yellow house, right?
I wonder who's going to write Published and Perished when we're all dead and gone.
That's what I'm thinking. Some of you might be in there.
How did you
Don't
think
perish
of,
soon, please wait. Yeah.
how do you think of the name Published and Perished?
Well, because of the university thing about publish or perish.
No,
right?
I know. I'm familiar with that. In fact, if you look at my T-shirt, it starts out saying write, and then it says revise, 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 and then at the very end it says publish, but I crossed it out and wrote perish instead.
Oh, that's
Right. So I'm familiar with the Publish and Perish,
Yeah.
but I thought it was really cute for the title. I mean, so like at what point in writing the book did you come up with that cute name? Or did you come up with that originally and make a book all around it?
I actually wrote a book several years ago, which was remembrances of great authors by friends, elegies that were written about them after they died. They were very personal. Starts with Ralph Waldo Emerson remembering his friend Henry Thoreau. It goes up in Hemingway. I mean, I thought it was the best book I've ever done, because this stuff was really hard to find. It has all the great authors in the canon, American authors. And I, as a joke, David Godine was the publisher, floated Published and Perished as a play on words. And he said, oh, I love it. So that book came out as Published and Perished. Well, it turns out it was a critical success, but didn't sell very well. So when he did it in paperback, he changed the name, something like Now Forgotten or something like that. So the name reverted, I kept it in mind. And then I thought this would be a perfect title to redo, So get to use these titles over and over again.
I have 3 different books called The Literary Cat. They are not at all related to each other, but there's 3 of them.
The Literary Cat?
The Literary Cat. It's just stories about cats, but the point is you can use the same title for
Oh, yeah, well, there's lots.
Yeah.
I looked up some titles and there'll be 10 books with the same title.
Yeah. So
You can't copyright a title.
right, yeah. So I also wanted to ask, I can't remember the name of there's a movie called Cutter's Way or something like that.
Yes,
There's a murder during Fiesta. And it was based on a book.
yeah.
I don't know if the book has the same name, but was that a Santa Barbara author that you're familiar with?
Yeah, his name was Newton Thorberg.
Yeah, that's
And it's a real, okay, if you're gonna talk about the great Santa Barbara novels, that's one of them.
really. But he's not in your book.
He's in the original book. Yeah, I have several pages about.
Oh, okay.
He wrote quite a few books. No,
I didn't
anybody
know
that I
that.
had, he was alive back. Any information I had, I didn't put in this book. But yeah, that's a great book. And that was a movie, you remember. Now, it was funny because the star of the movie since moved to Santa Barbara, and that was Jeff Bridges. And it's filmed during the Fiesta. It's really it's a good Santa Barbara movie. And it's available, so check it out. And he wrote another book about Santa Barbara too. I forgot the title right now. I don't have the book. But
Well, that's good to know. I guess I'll have to get your first book. I mean, not your first book, but the previous book, The Literary Santa Barbara.
you have to get it. If they don't have it, I
Available
don't
at
think they have
Chaucer's?
it. Probably get it on Amazon for $1.
Now,
You know, I
I'll
look at
wait for Planned
my guide.
Parenthood.
It's always humiliating, these books you do, and you find them, it says used copy, 1 cent or something. And $3.95 for shipping. Of course.
What does your book sell for and how do we get it? We go to Chaucer's and
Or you go to Chaucer's. I think it's $15.
that's a steal of
I
a
got
deal.
this, it is, I get to set the price.
What if
And,
we want a
I mean,
signed
money-
copy?
Do you
so I'll
sign
go
them?
there. I'll go
Are
see
they-
my wife.
What if we want a signed copy?
Well, I don't know. I think Chaucer ships, don't you, to people? Michael?
He's mute. You're muted, Michael, but you can go in
Yes, I
and sign a
know.
bunch of books, put a bunch of signed books there in the local authors section and then they can.
Right, or you can go online and order the book, right?
Yes, you can go chaucersbooks.com, or you can give us a call if you'd like. Steve, if you can come in the next few days to sign some of your copies, that'd be great if you have
Yeah.
some time.
Sure, I think I can manage it. I'm a busy man.
And busy COVID time.
Yeah, right.
Did
So-
your wife Inga help or who'd you have proofread all this?
Well, Inga did some proofreading.
Uh-huh.
I think she's here anonymously. I see her name down there, but
Yeah.
she hasn't appeared. She hasn't spoken. She's very reticent, about these things. Yeah, I see other people I know too. They're just listening, waiting for me to trip.
Well, I think it's a
Actually-
wonderful book and
Is this Henry by any chance?
Yes, it is. Surprise, surprise.
I thought that might be you. It's very funny, Henry. This is an aside, but my next door neighbor is John Beck.
Are you
And he
kidding
was
me?
telling me that he did a movie once about skydiving, but he had never seen it.
Sky
So I
Riders.
found it on YouTube, skydivers, and who's in it but Henry Brown. You know that? Are you both aware of the fact that you live here?
Oh, yeah. He used to
Oh,
get
okay.
on my case for not living in LA. And then he defected here. But
Yeah.
yeah, we spent a lot of time in Greece. It was about hang gliders. Hang
Yeah,
gliders.
is it really? Actually, it was a pretty interesting movie, really.
I'm glad you liked it.
What's the name of it?
I think your stunt guy did a lot of the work on that.
I'll tell you something. They didn't have any black guys. I was the only black guy in Kalabaka, Greece. So they had a white guy in this really ratty afro wig. And unfortunately, I think he got killed. And so I had to do a lot of my own stunts.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
very impressive.
That's why I limp a lot.
Great,
But I
Henry.
think it's fabulous. I look forward to getting your book. It's
Nice
most
seeing you. I'd love to get together with you sometime. Do
We
that.
shall.
The name of the
Okay.
hang gliding movie? What's the name of it?
It's called Sky Riders.
Right, Riders. It's on YouTube, the whole movie.
And Henry's your go-to guy speaking of stories, isn't he, Steve?
Yeah, Henry did.
He's
got
the
some
voice.
Stories, are you kidding? Classic. No,
I was
there-
very
there-
bummed when you
there
said
was
you
no-
got bored with it, because I really enjoyed working with you, and people
Oh.
stop me all the time and remember, I had a blind couple, they're both musicians, and I was in Ralph's, and they says, "That Henry Brown? We know you from speaking
Your
of stories."
voice.
I was very flattered.
No kidding. Well, I didn't get bored with it. It got, the audience got bored with it.
Yeah.
It was around for 25 years and young people, they're on their podcasts and they're really not interested in seeing live performances of actors speaking. So
I'm
We
ready
had
for a
fun.
resurgence. I'm ready for a resurgence. I think the spoken word and radio, since I'm a little bit young, I missed that, but I really enjoyed it.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I
We did-
remember my
Yeah.
friend told me after you read his story, and he goes, he made my story sound good.
Who was that?
I'm not saying because he's still alive. He's not perished. And if I say something, I'll be
But you
perished.
might
Now, let me
be,
know as soon as
right?
it finishes. Yeah.
Well, you could just tell him that the people who chose him, Steve and Cara Pena, and forget, they were so discerning. If it was done on our program, it was worth it.
Well, there
My
were
dog
certain
Eddie.
stories. Oh, there you go, your dog.
Eddie James.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, those were upstairs at the theater upstairs there in, what was it called? The
Yeah.
Great Park.
Why am I forgetting what it's called?
Upstairs in the Paseo Nuevo. What's the theater called? The
Center
Center
stage.
Stage
Center
Theater.
stage,
Thank
center
you.
stage.
Yeah. I think that's when I first met you, Steve. I helped you with some of those,
You did. That was
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Tina Allison and some other people to come read. They were
That's
wonderful.
Yeah,
Wow.
we were young and gifted. And white.
Young, gifted,
So
and white.
does any-
What else?
There you go.
does
Anybody
anybody
else?
have any more questions for Stephen?
See, we found out how to get the book, how to get the signed copy of the book.
Yeah.
I really look forward to it. I really do. I'm hoping there would be another opportunity, maybe where you could do this with a live audience.
Oh, yeah. I was asking.
Instead of a dead one?
He was very cagey about when they're
Instead
going
of
to do
a
it.
perished one.
We would call this
Yeah.
the Grateful Dead. We're grateful.
I have a question, Steve, for your next book.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody knows that you are also an artist, a mixed media artist, collage artist. And that's why
Oh.
his cover is as gorgeous as it is. And I think Steve likes putting things together and collecting, and he did it actually in a visual art form. And, maybe there could be some kind of spin-off on that, Steve, with
that fun, huh?
in terms of art in Santa Barbara, the art community, the art world, galleries, museums.
Wow, would be a daunting project. You
Yeah,
have to come help me, Robin.
okay, I will.
Okay,
Invite me up.
thank you.
All right.
Yes,
I
Stephen,
promise you guys that no matter where you open this book, this is what I love about it, because you can just open it anywhere and you're
Right.
just gonna get a different, wonderful little, journey into these
Right.
incredible lives with suicide, murder, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We got it all.
no rock and roll, but well, actually, they're psychologically, but they can be read in. It's what they call a dippable book. You can just dip in anywhere.
Hmm.
But yeah, they're all separate. So it's not continuous.
All right, Steve, take us
Yeah.
home. Take us
Yeah.
home here. What do
Take
you got
us
to
home.
say?
Well, what can I say? I don't even, if you like the book, I think you'll like the book. Wow, this is weird. See what's happening?
Yeah, you gotta
Ooh.
change your background. It's a spiritualist. It's what's her face. It's Josephine Wolcott.
There you go. Well, there are some gremlins in here somewhere. I have to go back in my library behind me and do some more research, I think. But thank you all for attending. It's really been fun. I really enjoyed this. And I'm glad we can all fit on the screen.
Thanks
Leslie-
for writing a wonderful book and all your research, Steve. It's just remarkable. And it's like I said, it's a love letter to Santa Barbara, to the literary world, to these people who are either rolling over in their graves or delighted singing in the heavens, depending upon what you said about them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks a lot, really, for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice
Hey,
evening,
bravo.
everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye, Inga. Bye, Inga.